Antidepressants. They're some of the most prescribed medications in the entire world. But let's be honest, how they actually work can feel like a total black box. So in this explainer, we're going to pop the hood, break down the science, look at all the different types, and really clarify what's going on inside the brain. Let's dive in. So, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the big question. What does science even think is going on in the brain when someone is depressed? Then, we'll tour the medications designed to help, from the modern go-tos like SSRIs to the old-school drugs that started it all. And finally, we'll get into the really important safety info and what this all means for you.
Okay, first things first. Before we can understand the solution, we have to understand the problem these drugs are trying to solve. So let's look at the main theory of what's happening in the brain during depression, because pretty much every single one of these medications is built on this one core idea.
So yeah, what is going on in there? To even begin to answer that, we have to look at a hypothesis that has really shaped the entire field for decades. And it's all about these tiny little chemical messengers in our brains.
And that brings us to this, the biogenic amine theory. For a very long time, this was the central idea, that depression might be caused by just not having enough of key neurotransmitters, especially serotonin and norepinephrine. Now, we know the picture is way more complicated than that today, but this theory is still so important because it's the launchpad for how most antidepressants are designed, to turn up the volume on these specific chemical signals.
And here's something that is absolutely critical to understand. These medications are not a magic bullet. They don't work overnight. Even though the chemistry in your brain changes pretty fast, it can easily take 2 weeks, maybe more, before you really start to feel better. And hitting that maximum benefit? That could take 12 weeks or even longer. It really is a marathon, not a sprint.
All right, so with that basic theory in mind, let's look at the heavy hitters, the most common antidepressants you'll see prescribed today, SSRIs and SNRIs. Doctors almost always start with these, and there's a really good reason for it.
And that reason boils down to one word: safety. SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, became the standard starting point because they're just so much safer than the older drugs, especially if someone were to overdose. This massive improvement in safety, plus side effects that are generally easier to handle, is why they're the modern first choice.
So how in the world do they actually work? Well, think of it like this. Your nerve cells chat with each other using serotonin. After the message is sent, there's this little recycling pump that swoops in and sucks the leftover serotonin back up. What an SSRI does is basically get in there and block that pump. And the result? More serotonin is left hanging around to keep the positive conversation going, which is thought to help improve your mood. Now let's meet their close cousins, the SNRIs, which stands for serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. And you know what? The clue is right there in the name. While SSRIs are sharpshooters targeting only serotonin, SNRIs have a 2-for-1 deal. They block the recycling pumps for both serotonin and norepinephrine.
And that dual action has a really interesting bonus effect. See, norepinephrine pathways in the brain are also involved in managing pain signals. So because SNRIs give norepinephrine a boost, they can be super helpful not just for depression, but also for chronic pain conditions like fibromyalgia or nerve pain that so often go hand in hand with it.
All right, let's hop in the time machine and go back to the classic antidepressants. These drugs were absolute game changers in their day, but wow, they came with some really specific and kind of scary rules, including something famously called the cheese effect.
I mean, can you imagine getting a prescription with a warning label like this? It's not a joke. This was a life or death instruction for people taking a class of drugs called MAOIs. And this bizarre diet was absolutely necessary to prevent a truly dangerous reaction.
Here's why. MAOIs work by shutting down an enzyme that cleans up leftover neurotransmitters. Simple enough, right? The problem is that same enzyme is also responsible for breaking down a compound called tyramine, which you find in all sorts of aged and fermented foods. If that enzyme is blocked, tyramine levels can just skyrocket, causing a massive spike in blood pressure called a hypertensive crisis. Seriously dangerous stuff.
The other big classic group is the TCAs, or tricyclics. And when you put them side by side with modern SSRIs, it becomes crystal clear why they're not used as much anymore. TCAs are kind of messy. They hit a bunch of different receptors all over the body. That means you get a much longer list of common side effects like dry mouth, sleepiness, and blood pressure drops. And most importantly, they are way more dangerous in an overdose.
Next up, we have a category that's sort of a catch-all bin. The atypical antidepressants are this really diverse bunch of medications that just don't fit neatly anywhere else because
They all work in their own unique ways. And that diversity means they can be used to solve very specific problems. Mirtazapine, for instance, often makes people sleepy and hungry, which can be useful. Bupropion is special because it works on dopamine and helps people quit smoking, though it's a no-go for anyone with a seizure disorder. And trazodone, well, it's often prescribed in low doses not for depression at all, but just to help people get to sleep.
Okay, now for a really important topic, the risks. As much as these medications can change lives for the better, every single one comes with potential side effects, and some big safety warnings that apply to all of them.
This is probably the most serious warning of all. The FDA requires what's called a black box warning on every antidepressant, because for people under 24, these drugs can paradoxically increase the risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors. It's a scary thought, and it's why anyone in this age group who starts one needs to be monitored so closely.
Another major risk is something called serotonin syndrome. It's a potentially deadly condition that can happen when you just get too much serotonin activity going on. It's usually caused by mixing multiple drugs that all boost serotonin, like an SSRI plus certain pain meds, or even something over-the-counter like the herbal supplement St. John's wort.
And then, of course, you have the more common, though less dangerous, side effects. A lot of people feel a little nauseous when they first start. Sexual side effects, like a lower sex drive, are also really common, unfortunately. And because serotonin is involved in blood clotting, there's a slightly higher risk of bleeding. And finally, if you just stop them suddenly, you can get withdrawal symptoms.
Which is exactly why you should never, ever just stop these medications cold turkey. Your doctor will help you slowly, gradually reduce the dose to keep those withdrawal effects to a minimum. The one main exception is fluoxetine. You might know it as Prozac. It sticks around in your body for so long that it kind of tapers itself off naturally. So, we've talked about the science, we've walked through the different drug classes, we've covered the risks. Let's pull this all together and tackle the biggest question of all. How does anyone find the right treatment in all of this?
This is it, right? This is the question everyone wants to know. With all these different options, SSRIs, SNRIs, atypicals, each with its own quirks, surely one of them has to be the best, the winner. But the truth is, it's just not that simple.
The real answer is there is no single best antidepressant. Finding what works is an incredibly personal journey. The right choice is a puzzle that depends on your specific symptoms, your health history, maybe even your genetics. It's a careful, collaborative process between you and your doctor to find the one path that leads you to feeling better. Thanks so much for watching.